I'm Ali Velshi. Our coverage of the London terror attack continues. I want to bring Naveed Jamali back in, former FBI double agent. He's an MSNBC contributor. Naveed, you and I didn't talk that long ago, and yet so much has developed. We've had some detailed reports from people about what transpired. We now know that the assailants have been killed, and the strangest thing about this, we saw a photograph of it earlier, maybe our control room can put it up, of a man wearing what appears to be an explosive vest. The police now saying those explosive vests were fake. These men did not have guns. They used knives and, of course, their van. 6 people dead, the 3 assailants, suspects dead, 30 people in hospital. Naveed, you've been watching this with me the whole time. What do you make of it now?
Well, the first thing is that, look, terrorists, their tactics change. I think that, we've heard speculation about, you had a previous guest who talked about, who was an ATF agent, who spoke about if he saw those, something that looked like that, they would treat it as a bomb. And I think, if I'm speculating here, that's probably their intent. But at the core of this, Ali, what it signifies is, again, the terrorists, their gains, their aims are still the same. Their tactics change, and I think what we're seeing here is a reflection of that.
Tell me what you make of 3 assailants, not 1, which we've seen in the last 2 attacks in Great Britain, and in the attack in Nice, and in the attack, the truck attack in Germany. 3 assailants, an improvised plan, as you said, a van running down people and then going at them with knives. The reason I'm asking you this is because Rukmini Callimachi and I had a discussion a while ago in which she said, we're trying to draw lines between ISIS and Al-Qaeda and these attackers, when in fact they may just be successfully inspiring them.
That's exactly right. And look, Ali, if we can say 9/11 was sort of the pinnacle moment for counterterrorism, and how things have shifted from September 11th to how they are now. I mean, look, September 11th was foreign, primarily Saudi men here that enter the United States on visas and attack from within. And now we're shifting completely to the other spectrum. We're not necessarily we're seeing people that are traveling to Syria that are coming back, but rather people that, as we say, are being radicalized or homegrown. And I think that is perhaps the more nefarious and dangerous trend. It's nefarious because it's very difficult to track it. When you're looking at a profile, you can track for things like someone who has left the country. But when that person has never left, and in fact, we've seen in the UK attacks previously with people who wanted to leave and found it to be too difficult and in fact stayed. So again, it goes down to what I said earlier, that the goal is the same. It's the tactics are shifting. And look, whether it's Al-Qaeda or ISIS, I think that you're going to start seeing an attempt to continue to radicalize people from within those states that they attack. And that is a very dangerous thing and difficult one to counter.
When you think of all the years since 9/11 and the various other attacks that have gone around the world, we have tried to harden soft targets, but we've not wanted to give up our liberty. In France, after the attacks, cafe society persists. In London and New York and Germany, people gather outside. That's what they do. You heard my conversation with Fabio Lamas, who worked in that pub inside Borough Market, and he told us what he did to try and protect people when he heard of the commotion. They tried to lock things, they invited people in, they tried to get them into their garden, they locked them in the bathroom. Is that the way we harden soft targets in America? Because I don't think, or in Europe, we're not really looking to have security guards outside of everywhere that we congregate.
If that's what we're going to count on to be the primary line of defense to stop these attacks, we've already failed. And the good news is it's not. I mean, that's why these countries, the U.S., the U.K., we have a robust, active intelligence community. It's very important that, again, what we're seeing tonight is reactive. We're seeing, sort of law enforcement securing a crime scene, making sure there's no other perpetrators, about. But the reality, Ali, is that the intelligence community is really the first line of defense to both detect and neutralize these threats before they even come to a planning stage. And that's really, it's a very difficult thing for the public to see. Nonetheless, it is part of the fabric here. But, and again, going back to the idea of a terrorist attack, again, there are 2 parts of it. One is the actual kinetic one. The second part is the fear. Terrorists, that is the underlying goal. The attack is never as big as the fear that they want to perpetrate. And I have to say that out of every one of these attacks, and you just mentioned a few, we've always seen society sort of refuse to bow to fear.
Yeah.
And that's such an important part of this.
It is an interesting interesting response, an interesting part of the human spirit, that the attack may be relatively small, and this isn't to diminish anybody who's been injured, whose lives are lost, but the attack is relatively small. The immediate response and set of fears are very, very large, and then normalcy prevails with a little more security.
That's absolutely right. And look, the reality is, again, I'm a 9/11 generation person. I look at the world pre 9/11 and post 9/11 for me. And for someone like me, the terrorist attacks inspire me to join the military. So as a first generation American, I don't think I'm unique. I think that there's plenty of people that will look at this and will be horrified, and plenty of Muslims, plenty of first generation Britons and second and so on, that may come and look at this and say,
this is an interesting point you just made.
And I want to fight this.
The UK has had a lot of struggles with homegrown Islamic extremism, and yet it is a very integrated country.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And Europe as a whole has had, look, again, I wrote an article about this for a think tank, for the Foreign Policy Research Institute, but there's a big difference between the integration, I think, in many cases in Europe and the United States when it comes to Muslims, when it comes to immigrants. And I think that this is such an important point to make, that, look, we go back to Orlando. One of the first people that raised the alarm against this awful person was, in fact, someone who was in the mosque with him, who went to the FBI and said, there's something not right here. And that actually led to FBI surveillance. So I think that, it's so important to recognize that these are such a small percentage of these communities. And look, when it comes to policing, when it comes to intelligence, the best way, when you think about the NYPD, if you see something, say something, when it comes to that line of defense, in many cases, it's the community. And look, the United States, we're very lucky to have such good participation with these communities, which I think in many cases stops a lot of this. And clearly the UK does as well, but, I guess perhaps they could do a little better. We've seen Belgium, that's been, we've heard reports that is not the case.
Well, yeah, let's call a spade a spade. I mean, they don't have this right in a lot of mainland European countries, where they've just not been able to. These are colonial countries that just weren't able to deal with these waves of immigration that came in and figure out how to integrate people, none of which is an excuse for terrorism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But
integration's a good thing.
Absolutely. And look, again, it's that line of defense, right? It's the community policing. It's the broken windows. You have to rely on people who are there, who can say something. In many cases, it's someone who might have to turn a brother, a sister, a cousin, a husband, a wife. This is heart-wrenching stuff, but if they don't trust the police, if they don't trust the intelligence community, they're not going to do it. And that is such an important part.
It's an important part, and we're going to be talking a lot about it in the course of the next few days. Naveed Jamali, let's take a quick break. I want to just tell people what we know right now. We have been told by police that 6 people have been killed, 6 civilians. 3 perpetrators, alleged perpetrators, have been shot dead by police. They were wearing vests that seemed to have explosive on them. Police say they were fake. They did stab a number of people. 30 people now in area hospitals being treated. That number may go up. 15 shots or more fired. Police responding to the scene 8 minutes after the first call came in. It is now early morning in London. Our special coverage on MSNBC continues. I'm Ali Velshi. We'll be right back.
Yes.